each person could be seen as being a community. A community in the sense, almost the ordinary sense, that is the ordinary definition of what a community would be. That would be a group of some size that would have a specific location. It would have amongst the group would be a common government, common culture and history. And in some way this group would feel themselves to be distinct from the larger body of humanity as a whole, which is of course I plus not I. But in that sense, can you see that each person could be seen as being their own community? And I point this out to try and remind you or to help jog you to see why I use certain continuing mundane, apparently external examples such as politics, government, kingdoms, religions, and then try and get you to see that all of this is in some way reflected within the wiring system, within the actual genetic makeup of people, of individual people. Internally, you can see that each of you would be within the realms of fitting this almost routine definition of the word community, because internally each of you has, if you begin to see it, you have a governing aspect and you have the governed. You have the artistic aspect within the community of you, and you have the critical aspect, the critics. There is the partnership, or if you can see it extended, some of you can see that there is the corporation in existence. There is indeed my erstwhile description of a factory. The three-leveled factory is in each of you. And within each community / person, there is that overall necessary power flow going on. Not only the necessary transfer of energy and the flows of power between individual people, individual communities, individual nations, but individual communities, but there is the same overall necessary power flow going on inside of you, or else you would not be able to transfer any power or energy to any other community. Within the general confines of me talking about people as being a community, I have a further description for you of the breakdown of communities into other parts. The first kind of community there is no good word for. At least there's no good English word for it. And so I decided, I think I'll use oasis. Not literally, but since there is no other word, I'm going to use it as the first one. That everybody could be seen as being an oasis, a village, or a city. You can see this as individual communities throughout the world, that is, large groups of people. You can see it in the individuals inside of these external communities. The oasis, I remind you, don't look it up in the dictionary. I finally did, since I couldn't think of another word, and I was running out of possibilities. So don't take it literally, but by oasis, what I mean is all of these run progressively from the first to the third, and they become increasingly large and complex. And according to the English setup that I glanced through of words, the most simplistic was the old Anglo-Saxon word of Hamlet, but it still didn't fit. What I'm trying to get you to see, and you got to listen real fast, whether I'm talking physically or allegorically, an oasis would be a place of very temporary, it would be a temporary meeting place. And it would be concerning almost entirely basic red circuit needs. It would be a place of shifting occupants, coming and going. It would be a dangerous place. It would be a place dealing almost exclusively in barter of some type. I started to call it a way station, a layover. But why don't you understand now, you got to listen and try to see it yourself. It's not simply physically. It is a place. It is the first stage of someone becoming civilized, of a community, whether we're talking about you or whether we're talking about the Chinese. That there is a first stage and it's still in existence in China or in some individual somewhere. That communities meet, individuals meet, but is for the purpose, this temporary place, for the purpose of seeing to red circuit needs. The next stage would be the village. It would be a little more complex. And in the village you would have some, at least semi-permanent structures and institutions. And in the village you would have some social needs met. In the oasis there'd be no social needs unless you got a fast fuck maybe. But just as likely you'd get rolled or your throat cut. In the village, within the realm of what I am referring to behind the term social needs, and inasmuch as in a village, and remember I may not be talking now physically, materially, there would be some, at least semi-permanent structures and institutions. They would offer a certain degree, sometimes, of apparent safety. And along with meeting some social needs, as I mentioned, you would begin to have what is normally referred to, I guess, as certain more artistic or leisure time endeavors would begin to be developed in use, such as they might sit around and play music at the end of the day, they might engage in some kind of communal dancing, and there would be the first appearance by common decree, by common consent at least, of some kind of rules of conduct. The next stage would be a city, and the city would be even more complex than the village. In the city, you would have thinking of action becoming almost as important as action. This would be a quantum move from the village, because there would be instances in the city, and they would be always on the increase, wherein in certain situations thinking of action would be becoming as important there in the city limits, in the city community, that thinking of action in many or some cases would be becoming as important as acting itself. For the time being, I'll leave all that with you. The power flow continued from last week. This is of no importance. While I was staying here thinking, I was also thinking back to my recollection as best as was possible about definitions of words. In the village, it's of no importance whatsoever. I couldn't resist since I remembered it. It should probably be town. If I refer to it again, I'll probably go back and call it town so that you won't think I changed my mind. Because the English hierarchy of words standing here now, I recall it. It's one of the times I think I can trust my memory that the Anglo-Saxon distribution and growth went hamlet, village, town, city. Now, I'm just talking about ordinary definitions. So in case I refer to it again to keep the record straight, I guess my version should have been Oasis Town City. Not that I made a mistake. Always remember that. I'm admitting no mistake. The power flow continued. Give a break here in case somebody ever wants to erase that part off the tape. The power flow continued. I want to take that from last week into an area, and I'm going to jump off sideways into something that some of you should be able to begin to perceive. All of you should be able to begin to suspect it. And that is, this is the rather straightforward part I'm going to begin with. When a situation involving a power flow, which they all do, is not functioning, quote, properly, very often life makes humanity, or some group of humanity, aware of the fact. But it comes out in strange ways, such as what should be a good example. I pointed out last week that this power flow, there's always, in any situation that is a viable, extant situation that's going to last over a few seconds, it's not just time-wise, but that the participants feel as though this is a situation, this is a relationship of some kind, of some length, of some importance. When that happens, then there is, in those two people, if it's two people or two communities, the appearance of power going, or control being exerted from one of these individuals or one of these entities to the other. That one is driven, apparently, to seek dominance in the power flow situation, and the other one seeks, although it may appear to you to begin with that they acquiesce, but they are seeking to be dominated, to be controlled. And one of the examples I threw out to you last week was parents and children, although parents must have children to keep the race going. And yet, you can see that part of being a parent is to exercise control over the kid. And part of being a kid is to have a parent say, all right, eat those green beans, and in 10 minutes go to bed. No, don't say a word, do it. And you can have a bicycle when you're 10. 10, not 9, 10. That's it. All right. When it's not functioning properly, let me give you an example. When this situation seems to be reversed, that is, in situations wherein children are accused or shown to have begun to mistreat, even physically abuse their parents, they have begun to exercise control. The parents say, my son is getting completely uncontrollable. He hits me since his father died. He'll actually get drunk and come home and ask him where he's been. He's hit me several times. He knocked me down. Throughout the world, people hear about this and they shudder. Ooh. The power flow is not going the way that would normally be expected. It's an anomaly in the power grid system. But now let me jump off the sideways point that some of you need to explore. Not only do people shudder over this, not only is it condemned judicially, socially, but further, dig this. This condemnation all over the world presents itself with religious trappings. Immediately, even I know enough to know that in the Bible, in the Quran, this is specifically condemned. Withal, it is first assured to all would-be Christians, Jews, and Muslims to respect, to honor, to obey, to love, to care for your parents. But then it is specifically condemned as being against the will and the plans of God or Allah for a child to mistreat their parents, to raise their hand to their parents, to even argue with their parents, to refute what their parents say. It is specifically referred to as being against God's will or Allah's plans. It is specifically said, if a child does this, you are correct to shudder. The reason you're shuddering is you're feeling the hot breath of the gods. This is the sort of thing up with which the gods won't put. Now listen. What you have got, it sounds as though it's religious. Now listen fast, I shouldn't have to give you much of a preface. You newer people, it's not an attack on religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's to point out the camouflage situation, to point out how the obvious is overlooked. The obvious is impossible to be seen except those people that have three eyes. That is, the mutants that I seem to attract. A little humor, folks. It is presented religiously that the will of God, the plans of God, the great cosmic plans to make us all good people, religious people, absolutely prohibits the situation of children exercising some sort of control over their parents, mistreating them is the way it comes out. And throughout the world, what I want you to see is all communities have some variation of this, and the community as a whole shudders and feels like, yeah. Even people in the community that may not overtly proclaim to be very religious, they think, well, that's one of the things that our religion's right. That there's something drastically wrong. There's something wrong with a child mistreating their parents more than going against some social mores. There is something deep-rooted here, to read in chapter so-and-so of the Quran or the Old Testament that says, the gods will take care of any child that would raise their hand or raise their voice to their parent. And people that don't even claim to be religious go, ooh, there's something deep there. That really hit a nerve. That hit the truth. But note, what is actually taking place, what is taking place is the yellow circuit acting as an apologist for, an accuser of, the lower circuitry's feral behavior as man gradually evolves out of it. That is what is taking place. It is an example, and there are many, but this is a specific example of an apparent religious doctrine, that is, things being against the will of God. It's apparent doctrine of some kind, when in actuality it's a situation of life going against its own present physical laws and standards of efficiency. But how are you going to present that? There's no background, there's no basis for it. In other words, it is inefficient under life's present standards. Were it not inefficient, there would be no condemnation of it. But note, things are simply arranged. Not that I'm right for some reason, because I'm no more right than life could be right, and you're more wrong than life could be wrong, and vice versa, and inside out. But there is no background, there is no way, and you should find this curious. You should be able to do something with this on your own, without a period behind it. There's no way to simply say, well, children shouldn't mistreat their parents because it's inefficient. Look, most I got some of you laugh after I've been talking about it for 10 minutes. But the message say it's against God's will. The blessed arrangement that Allah has made out of the cosmos are that children should respect, obey, be submissive to their parents, and if they act otherwise, it is an abomination. It's a sin. That sounds right. That feels right. But to say you shouldn't do it because it's inefficient. And some of you still wonder, does religion serve a purpose? Whoa! Does gravity serve a purpose? You cannot deal with large segments of life, with ordinary people, non-mutants. You can't deal with them. You cannot pass along any information that they'd find worthwhile by trying to point out that life itself is alive. Life itself lives by certain rules, wherein when it falls into ordinary consciousness and becomes ideas of gods, they believe that gods are not subject to their own rules. That's the way ordinary yellow circuit mentation operates, as you should know by now. If a god is God, he's omnipotent, and he can do anything he wants to. He can change the laws. All the so-called holy books in the world are full of miracles. People praying and making sun stand still, walking on water, flying through the air, raising the dead. Of course, none of you have ever seen it happen. And none of it happens this afternoon at an appointed time. It's just reported that it happened one time, and it sounds all right. Yellow circuit cannot really do anything with it and can't disprove it. It can't believe it. It is not rationally open to evidentiary proof, but something in humanity accepts it. Something has a kind of positive vibration to it. But if you simply said that there are laws that life lives by, there are laws that you live by, there are laws that you live by as to what you can put in your body with immunity. There are laws about what you can do to yourself physically and still survive. There are laws in each case of you as a community is ways in which you, if you're ordinary, that you must live according to the common culture and history of you as an individual, an ordinary individual community, or you'll suffer from it. To wit, apparently you develop emotional or mental problems. But to try and pass along any useful information, you should be able to hear it. Enough of you laughed, and I don't think I have to try and underline this much more. You could not talk to ordinary people in any way that would apparently be profitable and say, listen, most of what, or even all of, if you understood it, what is passed off as being things against the will of the gods. All it is life itself talking to itself through man about ways in which it presently, you got to remember what the present is to life. Your lifetime may be nothing compared to the present of life, but that it presently finds itself in certain instances doing things through humanity, very things that go against its own extant, its own present, physical laws and standards of efficiency. Now, they may be open to change. The day may come that life needs to grow in a certain way, and it may need large numbers of children to whip up on their parents. I'm not predicting this, but it's possible is what I'm telling you. But notice I say presently, which is the only thing that interests you. It's the only thing that should interest you. And so what passes and what seems to strike people under the guise, the proper guise, is being forbidden actions, even forbidden thinking of actions, but forbidden actions because it's against the will of God, and it strikes you that, yes, I don't even believe in God necessarily, I didn't think, but to hear about children breaking their mother's arm, throwing their father down the stairs, cursing him, God, that gives me cold chills. Maybe I'm an atheist, but that's about as close as I could believe in God and evil. That, boy, that is terrible. I'm just putting words in some fictitious person's mouth. But it just all around the world. That's just one example. Of course, you got murder. But here's one that strikes, that vibrates in people, that truly, this is despicable. And even if I don't particularly believe in God, if I did believe in God, this would surely be one of the things that piss him off. I can just feel it. That just ain't right. It's inefficient. By life's present, by life's prevailing present physical laws and standards of efficiency, that is not the proper flow of energy. The point of all this was not to comment upon the interfamily misdeeds of people. But I'm telling you that life is arranged in such a way. It's things that have struck you all of your life, that your whole community wants to rise up in arms when it hears that such and such religion, or even such and such philosophical or mystical system condemns this as being against cosmic law, or being against the will of God, and it still seems right to you. You may think, well, I thought I was free from a lot of the motifs of my forefathers' religions, or any religion, but good grief, some of this has got some kind of very deep, cosmic, universal, surely touching on the Godhead somewhere, some significance. And it continues to hold you to the idea of some God, some force outside this system, making rules that he or she are not particularly subject to. And they strike you as being universal, absolute, and surely of some mystical, whatever that means. Surely of some religious, whatever that means. Significance. And what it is a very practical significance. Except humanity, the way things are arranged, and I'm not here to tell you necessarily why, if there is a why. People are not arranged inside the body of life itself. In the process of the life of life, things are not arranged where humanity can be moved in some noticeable fashion by pointing out that certain behavior, of no great importance to you individually, my son or daughter, but certain behavior is not the most efficient based upon life's present needs and its present laws concerning its own growth, and therefore don't do that. Right, yeah. But the way things are arranged, the message comes out, God said don't do that. Now I'm talking about God. I'm talking about Allah said don't do that. You might think, well, I'm not real religious, but why take a chance? It doesn't seem right to me anyway. I mean, even being an atheist, if I caught some kid that was beating up on his parents, I'd be inclined to beat up on him. And so if they insist that God said that this is just an absolute specific sin, affront to the cosmic forces, I can't really deny that. That sounds all right to me. I know I wouldn't do it. And some people feel as though if I did do that, or if I ever do it again, I could end up falling from the grace of the gods. I could end up far from the gods. I could end up on the other side of the coin of paradise. I could pay for all of this. That seems to have some ability to be a sheepdog to the herd of your community. That seems to have some ability to move humanity about, to move about their theories, their ideas, their thinking of action, and then ultimately some of their action. But to just simply talk to them and say, listen, which I should be able to do to you, most of you should be able to do it already without me going much further with this paragraph. It's not that saying children mistreating their parents is against the will of God. Nothing wrong with that. It's just for children. It's for the ordinary. But then to see that there is a reason. It's because it is an interruption. It is almost a reversal of the present proper power flow between parents and children. And it is life realizing that in instances, spotted about, enough that I can bring it up as an example, that within its own body, the same as in your own community, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed today, actions take place that go against the prevailing, present, physical laws, the power flow, and against its current standards and needs of efficiency. And the condemnation comes about in what is heretofore, and it's going to survive our lifetime. I'm not the one that's not going to be an immediate change worldwide, but it is now, and continues to come out as being presented in touching human behavior and thought in ways apparently religious, mystical, but religious about covers it. I had, in the last several weeks, I've got a question here I want to use to start with. Somebody wrote and asked me, to make some comment on the possible role that ritual would play in the pursuit of something new. Ritual. Now, I'm not going to be changing the subject much tonight, although it'll sound like it. Ritual. There's several ways that I would like to try and turn your attention toward ritual that's still connected to all of this tonight. First, should I point out the obvious? All right. Everybody loves ritual. Even people that may say, I hate that particular ritual. One time somebody drugged me to a Catholic church and I almost choked trying to hold back laughter. Of course, then they take a Catholic to a synagogue. They take a Baptist somewhere else. I can't resist. Somebody else told me a new joke. It's this Baptist guy I meet about every 2 or 3 years, and he always has a Baptist joke. Some little hamlet. And a new family moves in, and they never attend church. And finally, the Baptist preacher goes over, and he asks the man, why don't you attend church? And the guy says, I'm going to level with you. He says, we are so poor, our clothes would be embarrassing to show up at your church or to go out on Sunday. It's not that we don't want to go, but I'm going to tell you the truth. We're just embarrassed. The preacher's got access to some funds in the church, and he reaches in his pocket, and he gives the man enough money to buy the whole family new clothes. And the man thanks him, and he leaves. 2 or 3 Sundays pass, and he's still not at church. The minister can't resist. He goes over on Sunday afternoon. The family's sitting around eating. They're all dressed up in new clothes and look fine. He said, what happened? Did you use the money to buy new clothes? He said, yeah. He said, well, you hadn't been over to our church. And he said, I know. He said, we look so good, we went over to the Episcopal church. Poor old Baptist. In this sense, you people who have been here a while understand I use Baptist as allegorically synonymous with New Jersey, with Alabama, with Barstow. Ritual. Everybody loves ritual, even people who may not think they like ritual. Ritual is everywhere, but of course the person was asking the question, and what would seem to be of some significance to you people would be ritual somewhere within the realm of things like this, if not this. There's a certain amount of ritual to this. So we meet the same night every week. You know, I changed the presentation a little bit. It's been very gradual. You people in other cities, you have a standard specific schedule. The night you meet, you expect the tape's always going to be there. You put it on at the same time. Same people are there. But real ritual, what is its power? Now, an ordinary person, ordinary consciousness may say, well, whatever religion or mystical system seem to attract you, that seem to be the proper one for you, whatever their ritual is, has some real cosmic, some religious, some deep, or if the person is more psychologically inclined, I might say some subconscious message and importance is coming through this group. I may not understand the ritual or the people that you took up with. It may look silly to me from the outside, but I can understand ritual. In some way it's ordained. All the holy books throughout the world, from Buddha's talks, which purported originally to be no system whatsoever, just as soon as he turned his back, just as soon as he laid down and closed his eyes, all the way from him, of course, to Christianity and Judaism and everybody else. What's the name of it? The name of religion is ritual, if anything. But other than leaving it on the basis that it has some intrinsic religious purpose, in general or in specific, of some ritual, dig this. The power of ritual, several things. Ritual as new, that is new habit. That's the most basic. That gets everybody. Whether you understand it and you hear what I'm saying or not, I assure you, part of the pleasure of being converted to a new religion, finding a new system, finding some kind of system, taking up with a new guru, taking up with some new prayer group, going from being orthodox to reform. They call it ritual, but I'm telling you ritual as new habit. New habits are not that easy to come by. That's not a joke. They are not. Number two, ritual as the only knowingly acquired habit. Now, that's the way, of course, it appears. It's the only habit a person, an ordinary person, ever acquires that has the appearance of being knowingly, willfully acquired. That, yeah, I got converted over to being a Catholic, and you have to go and take the lessons, I understand. Well, hell, you have to do it to be a Jew. One thing you don't have to take lessons to be, I guess, a Baptist or an alcoholic. But the rest of them have these classes. You have to learn to make all the signs and the cross and light candles and stand up and nod your head and read the same. When somebody reads something, answer them back. You dress a certain way. You wear a hat, you don't wear a hat. You wear underwear on your head, who knows what. But, of course, now no ordinary person is going to accept or think about ritual as being habit. I'm pointing out to you, everybody has habits. You talk to the Pope and he'll say, yeah, I got a bad habit. I pick my nose when nobody's looking. I oversleep in the morning. Or sometimes I'm talking, I keep wanting to do this. I got habits, and sometimes I get jittery when I'm around women with big old breasts. I don't. And so everybody says, well, I got habits, and you say, where they come from? You say, I don't know. You know, habits, you just got them. I guess I picked them up when I was a kid. I've been doing this. I remember my mother said, don't rub your nose out in public. But since everybody loves habit, as I pointed out, well, I said love ritual, but I thought you knew what I meant. Since everybody loves habit, as I point out, the number one attraction and use of ritual is a new habit. And the second is, it's a new habit, and it's the only time that an ordinary person apparently acquires a habit willfully and knowingly. That, all right, I decided because of my new girlfriend to become a Catholic. And you have to go, you have to study to some degree. Somebody has to tell you, you know, to do the cross, you go it this way or you do it this way. And you got to go in, you got to know when to kneel, and you got to know this. You got to put forth some effort. In other words, in a sense, you went out of your way. You exerted real effort to simply pick up a new habit. I mean, learn the ritual. To pick up a new habit. And it's going to be the only time that an ordinary person ever apparently acquires a habit willfully. The rest of them, who knows where they came from? As long as I can remember, I've been doing this. As long as I can remember, a woman with big breasts makes me go, ooh, and I tend to saliva at the edge of my mouth. You don't know where they came from. I've always overslept. As far back as I can remember, kindergarten, my mother hollering, damn it, you overslept again. You know, who knows? They're just habits. But this, being able to go in that beautiful place, all these other people, and kneel at the right time and go, it's ritual. It has meaning. It's a fucking new habit, and you apparently acquired it on purpose. That's number two reason. Number two purpose. Number two attraction. Number two secret. Number three, so-called ritual is a habit in which the yellow circuit can participate. The yellow circuit apparently doesn't participate in this. You just do it. And if somebody says, you know, you'd look a lot better when you're making speeches if you wouldn't rub your nose, and you go, oh, well, I don't know, it's just habit, I forget about it. Or somebody says, you know, you'd have a lot more success, Fred, with women when we're in bars if you wouldn't drool at the mouth and just stare down women's dress all the time. I just believe, and just from one friend to another, I believe you might do a little bit better if you just wouldn't walk up and just put your head over women's cleavage and begin to drool on them. And then Fred would go, well, yeah, I know, I just can't help it. In other words, unless it's pointed out in some way, and then a man verbally defends himself or explains or apologizes, what I want you to see, habit, by its very nature, you could say ascends yellow circuit participation. It's like saying, why do you rub your nose all the time? The yellow circuit got no answer. I don't know. I don't plan to do it. I don't know where we got it. I don't know why I do it. There's no explanation. It's just a damned old habit. You're right. But ritual. Yellow circuit had to go, and the priest or whoever's teaching, what do they call them, cardinals or pigeons, somebody there teaches, all right, you do this, you do it this way. The yellow circuit has to go, wait a minute, wait. Let's say I got to reverse it. So you go here and then to your left, and the priest says, yeah. Then your left and then the right. So the yellow circuit says, right, top, left, right. Okay, I got that. And then what's some of the holidays, and how often should I go to confession? The yellow circuit participates in picking up this hobby, this habit. Oh, participating in this ritual. But there, my friends, is a parlay. Ritual. Ritual as new habit. Ritual as the only apparently knowingly acquired habit. Ritual as the only habit that an ordinary man will ever acquire in which the yellow circuit can participate. And anyone would have the nerve to ever wonder, what is the power of ritual? Well, since it obviously is powerful and worldwide, it obviously comes from the gods. Sure it does. With no change of subject whatsoever. The good old matter of change, the good old matter of people here, the good old matter of you people getting this from afar, people who see only the tapes, people who have met me once, people who's never met me, people who wonder how this would be going if I would fly out to your city once a week again and be there with you. People who wonder, why do not things go as quickly all the time as they do some of the times? Wondering, why do things seem to go in cycles? Why is it that I seem to be close to undergoing some kind of change, and then it seems to hit a fallow period for a while? It is possible for anyone who belongs in this, if you truly belong in this, if you are one of God's chosen mutants, if you're one of the cosmically selected anomalies, if you're indeed a somatic cell instead of simply a germ cell, you would have listened, you would have heard, and you would have tried, and then you would have remembered it within your own community consciousness that it is possible to affect drastic change in yourself, and there are two ways. One of them, simple. If you are indeed an anomaly, if you are indeed a mutant and you belong here, and that is to directly attempt and succeed, I might add, because I'm going to point to you again that it's possible. It's impossible for an ordinary person. It's possible for a mutant. And that is to drastically alter yourself physically. The body and its actions. But just look at it as being drastic body alteration. The other possibility is the same thing with the mind, with the yellow circuitry. Now, anytime I've been around any group of people for any length of time, and I know some of you seeing this tape either now or sometime in the future, I have not been around you and you do not feel like you're part of any kind of permanent group to the level that you hoped it would be. So just listen at me give examples of what I have done in the past. For any group of people I've been around any length of time, almost throughout the populace of the community, at least once I would give an aside personal task to somebody. And one of the most common I gave, one of the most common, so that you won't think it was just you if you ever did, was to pick out basically wimpy men and tell them, if you're going to stay here, I'm going to give you 8 weeks to do thusly. then I might sketch it out, and I might say, you've got to go join a gym. Not one of these American health spas. Nothing says spas. You got to find a place called Docs. You got to find a place where you go in. They got 2 rules: pay in advance and don't piss in the sink. You got to go there, and within 8 weeks, you've got to put through lifting weights. You have got to put 4 inches on your chest, 3 inches on your arms, 2 inches on your thighs, and you've got to be able to run 5 miles non-stop. And I would tell these people, and this has been basically men, and I picked out, believe it or not, just the right ones always. A few people, very few, as a matter of fact, if you're interested in gossip, ever turned right out and left. Just the number is just almost of no significance. But who pursued it? The further we go back in horizontal time we doing this, the more I followed up on it, the more I insisted. You bring me a report 8 weeks from now, and you either put on the 4 inches here and the 2 inches there, and you can run the 5 miles like I said. You either can do it then and tell me you can, or don't come back. The larger this grew, the more people I dealt with, the more the horizontal time flowed by, the less I went back and absolutely followed up to the nth degree to make sure that this was done. I would sometimes look at somebody later, and this person would go, yeah, I just look at them. And they'd say, yeah, you know, I went there. I didn't quite, I meant to tell you, I was going to write you a note. I never did get the full 4 inches on my chest, and I can't really, I can kind of jog and run, walk a while and then jog. I can do sometimes 5 miles. Boy, I got a lot out of that. I really did. I feel a lot better. But then I came down, I had the flu. I had an ingrown toenail for a while. My mother was in town. I changed jobs, and I couldn't get over there. I hadn't had enough money to keep up my payments there at the gym. And I just looked. All right. I didn't say all right, but I just looked. And they would swear that they understood the importance. They would swear that they did it enough to understand that, by God, I was on the right track in their case, that would have really helped them. They were beginning to feel better. They were beginning to feel better sexually. They were beginning to have a better self-image about themselves. They began to sleep better. All of that psychological shit. But without me staying on top of somebody, without me saying you either do it and me staying as soon as they put on 4 inches here, for me to keep upping the game, to keep increasing it. How many of you ever took it far enough to understand I'm telling you close to a secret? I've been hinting for the last few months, such as doing men and women. Take up something apparently that has no particular physical purpose to learn how, for instance, or to get to the point, not learn how, because I assume that you all got that much intelligence. If you don't, I'll do a diagram. But to get to the point that you could do 50 push-ups, just boom, boom, boom. Or every day do 2,000 sit-ups for no reason. Here is one of these secrets, but here's why it's a secret, is nobody will do it. If you would affect drastic change, and I'm staying with what appears to be the simple of the two, the simpler, that is physically as opposed to affecting drastically your thinking. But if you would drastically alter yourself physically, you would know what real change was about. And I'm not talking about some kind of psychological something that the kind of men that I picked out, or that some of you might suspect in your own case if I never told you, that, yeah, I should go join up with the place Docs. It's not to turn you into Mr. California or New York or Mr. Omaha. It's not to make you stronger. It's not to have you out running in races. That's got nothing to do with it. Everything's connected. Not only are you doing something physical that you had never done, but the very people, me knowing my business, I'd pick out. It's not simply that you would have never on your own ever lifted weights, which is really neither here nor there, is what you got to understand. But if you had ever wanted to lift weights, you would have never, and I'm saying unconditionally, you would have never gone up to the 3rd floor at that place at Doc's Gym. You'd have gone somewhere called Miss Powderpuff Co-ed Health Spa. Maybe. But never would you have ever gone to Doc's Just the picture of it, for me to describe the place, your entire being trembled. That if I walked in a place like that, I just know the kind of people be there. I'd walk in, and as soon as I put my head in the door, some big guy would walk over to me and just grab me and go, there's no doubt. They would. And as soon as he knocked me down, somebody else, one of those big old, real dumb-witted, somebody that's probably a football player in high school or college, they'd come over and pick me up and hit me again. I'd die. And worse than that, than just physically being hurt, I'd probably die psychologically or some way. And you down people want to write, you want to sit around and discuss about how to affect change. I'm going to tell you again, each and every one of you, and what appears to be the simpler of the two. This is money back. This is ironclad. If you would drastically affect yourself physically, you would know what change was. And it is, you may think it sounds simple for me to describe, and some of you may be sitting there within the partnership right now thinking, hey, I should do something like that. I bet there is some basis for it. The mistake is at a very superficial, that is a very mechanical, a very hardwired yellow circuit level. You may believe that there are people in the world changing themselves physically right now. Just witness the so-called health boom. Witness the proliferation of health spas everywhere. The number of people jogging, doing aerobatics, etc. But if you're the type I'm talking about, Mr. and Ms. Wimp, you're not one of them. You'll never be one of them. That is the only way that this drastic alteration is possible. It is a direct, I don't mean, of course, immediate like that, but it is a direct way to get your finger on the DNA print. You can change yourself molecularly. Forget about ritual. Forget about praying and fasting forever. Forget about whirling and dancing until you throw up and see visions. I'm talking about permanent change. And all of you, well, it's diminishing. There's some of you people attracted to this, that if you individually tried the drastic physical approach, you would have less success than the other way. And that's no big secret. Just those of you that wouldn't, you should be able to feel it by now. Those of you that wouldn't hesitate if I said, hey, I want you to join a gym, you'll find. Now, I want you to join a real dirty one that everybody spits on the floor and everybody burps and makes rude social noises while they're there. And most of the people are named Bubba and Biff. I mean, not Biff, but... And many of you go, fine, okay, what else? And I want you to start lifting weights where you can deadlift 600 pounds and bench press 650 pounds. You go, really? And I say, yeah. And they say, okay, I'll do it. You got to understand that that would not be the most efficient way for you. And it's gradual, like a bell curve again. But it is a gradual crescendo and diminuo of these things passing. That some of you, the way to affect drastic permanent change would be for you to try and affect drastically the yellow circuitry, the thinking process. But still the majority of you, the majority of people in the world, the majority of people attracted to this, the easiest apparent way of the two would be to simply affect your physical self drastically. But it takes a miracle. It's what I'm trying to get you to understand. The people out jogging right now, I don't care if they get through and they go to a carrot juice bar and everybody compares how much weight they've lost, how much inches they put on here. People that say, before I started this, I was smoking 10 packs of cigarettes a day and I was 20 pounds overweight, and now I feel so good. They don't count. That's no change, believe me. Well, you should know it. If that was any change, the centers of man's spiritual life would now be at Biff's health spa. It has to be drastic alteration. It has to be drastic change. And to be drastic change, it has got to be something that you would have never done. It's got to be something that goes against the DNA print of you. There's got to be something that requires effort. And if you know what I'm talking about, I don't have to say anymore. Great effort, real effort. There's either effort or no effort. And the people out running, ordinary people, they're not making any effort. They're running because the doctor told them they're going to die. They're running because Reader's Digest said they're going to die. They're running because they began to spit up blood. They're running because their brother-in-law did die and he only smoked 5 packs a day. There is something in the overall genetic makeup of life itself that made them do that. For it to be drastic action, it's got to be something that requires effort. It's got to be something that you would have never done. It's got to be something that has, on the surface, no real reason to be done. That is, for me to say, all right, you should do something to drastically alter yourself physically. And the purpose of you being here originally was what? I want to alter myself spiritually, you thought. This would be drastic and useless compared to what you thought. For those of you that think things do not go fast enough, that think that I'm holding back a secret, I'm telling you a damn secret. I'm telling you a secret that is an ironclad guaranteed. But note, you won't do it. And the groups here and in other cities are replete with those of you that I've made do it or hinted to do it, and you would now say, yeah, I did it enough to know before you're right on the money. If I'd had more time to pursue it, which I'm going to do later, no telling how much better I'd feel. Fuck feeling better. I'm telling you that you would have found out what real change is about. And you won't do it. And you want to whine. You want me to tell you something else. I'm telling you something. We've got to turn the tape over. This has been going on in various ways throughout recorded history. But as some of you may know, this century, some people, if I recall, it was one physician, cum psychologist, I guess, tried to classify humans by their physical build. Somatology, I guess it was originally called, was the anthropological view of man based upon his physical traits. And I think this doctor finally just began to call his somatotypes. But he decided from looking at people, and he collected them up into some book I saw one time of 1,000 photographs of nude people, front, sideways, and back. And he concluded from these observations that there were 3 basic types of people. It had to do with one type's the distribution of fat, one of them the distribution of muscle, and the other, I forget exactly what he called it. But he had the 3 basic types, and then he had some graduating scale of how much you were of type 1 and how much you were of type 2, and then it came out he had, I think, 88 basic types that he quit. But he decided that out of all these people that he had observed in these photographs, that there were actually identifiable types of people. And that shouldn't come as any great surprise, and I'm not recommending you people go back and find that book, because you wouldn't learn anything from it, other than the fact you'd learn that everybody's hardwired. But some of Western psychology, including this guy, if I remember, then began, after they made all these photographs, and that was enough to make him a small reputation, to spend his life making 1,000 photographs of 1,000, I assume they're all different people, 3 shots of them nude, and to notice that they all continued to have characteristics. That some people always had guts that came out. And some people were wide up here and narrow in the hips. Some people were narrow in the shoulders and wide in the hips. Then some people seemed to be straight up and down. Then, as though that weren't enough, he and a few other people began to notice, after talking to them and having them stand there and pose in the nude back in the 30s or 40s, whenever it was, that there seemed to be some kind of connection between their build and their personality. Even at odd moments, life lets information seep out. As far as I know, I'm not trying to overplay this now, but I'm just using an example. As far as I know, Sementology or semanotypes is not of any particular great interest now in psychology or to the general public. As I said, not that you people would get anything out of the books unless you want to look at 1,000 non-erotic photographs, 3 views, and most of the people weren't even that interesting to look at, men and women, because you had all these types with fatty places that would be outside the realm of current, I suggest to you, Hollywood standards. But I assume you also see that I'm trying to suggest to you that the kind of information and things I'm talking about drastic change being possible, it shouldn't be a great secret to you. The information has been floating around. The same kind of things as people have been theorizing that Jesus, for instance, and the 12 disciples, that 12 was some magical number, and you can trace it back if you look in a certain way into some of the so-called Hindu religious writings, that the gods made 12 kinds of people, 6 kinds of male, 6 kinds of female, and between them they constitute everybody. Or the belief that Jesus picked out these 12 people and they were the 12 basic types of humans possible. Now, I'm not telling you that that's true, but I'm telling you this: you've been wasting your eyesight if you have not realized that there seems to be a limited number, limited combination genetically of people. And you have been wasting a lot of your eyesight if you hadn't realized that you meet somebody for the first time, or just see somebody at a party, or when you really get good, see somebody walking down the street 3 blocks away, and they're waddling a certain way and walking a certain way, and it distracts you that if that is not Fred X, it's his twin brother, and you see it's not him. And if you don't understand or else follow up on it, if you don't want to trust me, to find out he's got the same political beliefs as Fred X, married to the same kind of woman, has the same kind of sexual proclivities, has the same kind of Fred X, it's his twin brother, and you see it's not him. And if you don't understand or else follow up on it, if you don't want to trust me, to find out he's got the same political beliefs as Fred X, married to the same kind of woman, has the same kind of sexual proclivities, has the same kind of apparent interest in life, has a similar background. Who can explain that? The numbers of people are limited. Or, as a great philosopher once said, that I happen to know personally, whose initials were MM, said one time, variation of another one, but said, once you met one person, hell, you met them all. What they were suspecting, what people's talked about, all the way from it being some mystical number of 12 or 12 squared or 36, 144, it doesn't matter. But the belief that there is some finite number of people, just types of people physically, is how they started this, or at least the guy I was telling you about in this century here in this country. That supposedly, the best I recall, his interest was simply physically to start with. That, boy, there's a lot of people that sure do look alike. And those of you that's got the kind of yellow circuit that's wired up the right way, you ought to understand a man of that kind can turn that into a lifetime pursuit. Then he decides there are 3 basic kinds having to do with the distribution of muscle and fat in the way that the body is either wedge-shaped this way or wedge-shaped this way, and then they seem to be some of them real active and some of them not active at all physically. And then you begin to put these grades, these standard that, all right, if you call in relationship your hips to your shoulders, if there is a ratio of 2 to 1, then you put a number on that. And then if the waist is a certain relationship to the length of your legs, that's 1. And it just works out and it becomes a blossoming, a self-fulfilling mathematical universe. And then he gets the photographs. And sure enough, it all fits. By God, it all fits. It's a wonderful hobby. A way it's better, than spend your life collecting garbage or stamps or birds' eggs. Or opinions. But then, in the final days, for him to begin to suspect that there seems to be some correlation between the build of these people and their, quote, personality. All right, all this has been simmering around. It's threaded throughout religion, philosophy, common knowledge, throughout history of humanity. And yet, have you ever used it? Has it ever struck you as being of any significance? A curiosity? Hell, you are part of the curiosity. Go get that book. I said it wouldn't do you any good. Go get that book, and by God, you're in there. You can believe that. You're in there, and you got a number. But there is a man or woman in that book that is you. Go find it. The Atlas of Man was, now I remember, was the original title. But you'll look at it, or you can't get your husband or wife, somebody knows you. Now look at it, and there you are. The face is no importance. But there it is, standing nude, this way and then this way. There you are. It's you. And there you are. And plus, he's got a number showing how you are different from the guy or the woman, the photograph before you, the series, and the one after you. Now, gradually, you get further and further away from this one, and you get further and further close to this other group. You can alter yourself a few people. It's just almost impossible. Well, it's no more impossible than you ever getting anything from this. It's the same kind of impossibility. Same kind of odds. You can alter yourself drastically, which seems to be the simpler of the two, because I've told you ways for you wimpy people to go do the kind of thing I said. Or for all of you, or most of you, start doing 4,000 sit-ups every day for no reason. Just do it. Do it or die. Stay up if you have to all night. And you do it every day. 7 days a week, it doesn't matter what happens, you do it. Or you decide to go to the gym, and you're going to go 6 days a week, and you're going to spend 2 hours there no matter what. I mean, if you can get out of the bed, you're going to do it. And that's it. There's nothing else to talk about. And of course, you've got to be the kind of person that it takes effort. Effort. And it's not just physical effort. It's the effort of your personality, your partnership, thinking about the effort you're doing. Such as, boy, is this a waste of time? Shut the fuck up. What are we doing this for? It is ironclad guaranteed that you find that there's something you've got to make effort to do. Find something that the partnership finds to be useless, impertinent, in conflict perhaps, apparently, with your stated aim of being a more spiritually developed person. Find that book of all those nude fat people, and you're in there. There's how spiritually developed you are, and there's how spiritually developed you'll always be. You got your choice in this great, great binary country in which we so thankfully live. Make that world, of course. You can either work on actions, the body, or you can work on thinking of actions, the mind. Either way. And there are those of you, as I said, it's just easier to talk. It's easier to describe, and it sounds to be the simpler of the two to say, all right, go out and do 5,000 sit-ups every day. Anybody can understand that. Hardly anybody can understand, why the hell should I? But everybody can understand, here is a sit-up. You've never seen one? I can show you right now. Do it. Do 5,000 a day. Next. Everybody can understand that. But you can complain about some apparently esoteric ritual or prayer or some way to meditate and to try and picture golden winged pigs flying around Saturn while being able to simultaneously repeat some obscure Indian name for God's grandmother backwards. People can always beg off that, wait a minute, I hadn't got this right. 5,000 sit-ups, you got it right, Charlie. You understand exactly. Going to a gym 2 hours, 6 days a week, forever, you can understand that well enough. If you're going to understand that, don't come back here. You need your mother still to pin your name and address on your underwear. But either one of those approaches, either one, you will drastically, if you belong here, you will get your finger on the point to molecularly change yourself, and all your dreams about mystical states and what you were already hardwired to believe was the point of this originally will go poof, and you will feel it. You will die a different person, and you'll be, for whatever importance it may be, I'm not prepared to speculate. But you will be in a select few because everybody else dies. Everybody else exits the same way they introed. The end of the song is the beginning of the song. It is not a medley. In other words, change is impossible ordinarily. Because if you're going to talk change, you cannot talk that my Uncle Fred quit smoking when he spit up half of one of his lungs. Now, I know a fellow who quit drinking after he had a wreck and killed his wife and little child. Change is the alteration of one's DNA print. It is an absolute shift in what you are molecularly from when you were born. That's change. Anything else is not change. Anything else is the appearance of change. Anything else is part of the game itself, which most of you, that's going to be fine for. You find this intriguing. You find me talking about it, titillating at times. You found going to Doc's gym 3 weeks fun and exciting. Thinking back, even you in the partnership will admit that may have held out some promise. I wish it had worked out. I wish I'd stayed on it. I wish you had made me stay on it, perhaps. That is the only way to change. All the other ideas of I will pray forever, I will meditate forever, I will fast forever, people can't do it. They talk about it. If they could do it, it would be as good as going to Doc's gym 6 days a week, 2 hours a day. If you understood it. That's why I don't use it, because people think they understand it and they don't. You could pick out any religion, any man-invented name for a god, and instead of going to the gym, I'd make you up a prayer and a little ritual. And that's all right. You got to do this. You got to do it 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. You can always take off Sunday. But you've got to do this. Or if you could fast long enough, not fast to please the gods, not fast because somewhere in Deuteronomy or somewhere in the 5th book of the Quran it says you should fast every other Thursday. You should fast from sun up to sundown during the month of June. You can't have a reason. If you got a reason for it, you're still separated from it. If you can merge with it and do it for no reason other than to drastically affect and to alter either your thoughts of action, that is your mind, or your actions, that is your body. If you can drastically alter either one, you'll know what change is. You'll know what this is about for the first time. And there's no secret, no speculation. You have changed. You feel it. And it's not just these passing would-be, which is nothing wrong with. All you're going to go through some form of that, but these passing apparent mystical states. Since I don't use that word, most of you think I disapprove of it, you just think of it as being unusual states. The enriched blood is getting further up my system. I was able to use a part of the brain that I don't normally use. All my descriptions, they're all good. But all of that is simply foretaste of absolute molecular change of you in toto. It's just foretaste of it. It comes, it goes. And ordinary people, if they ever have it, as I've noted a few many times, they write a book on it. They start a whole school of philosophy, a whole school of thought, a whole school of would-be action on it. They can't ever repeat it. They don't know what the hell it meant. And it's really no change at all. But what they remembered of it, what they wrote about it, may make them famous. It may become a whole new cult of some kind. It may eventually become a religion. But they don't know what change is. And once you understand that, you understand why there are no heroes. There's nobody to emulate. You might read a book somewhere. You might read an article that you might get something from. But you know, with no negative feeling whatsoever, with no feeling at all, you know not to go try to find the author of this. Oh, if I could just find him. Because he or she experienced no change. They are exactly what they were wired up as when they were born. If they'd had the ability to take these DNA prints, as I keep thinking they're called, if they had the ability then, and you printed them, right out of the oven, as they say. That is, when you were born. That's what the British say. And then you gave them, printed their DNA as they were going out and buying the big farm. You had had the same person. They may have had now degrees added to their name. They may have written a book. They may have had followers. They're the same person they were when they came in here. This is not me talking, trying to convince you of something. Those of you that really belong in this, that have been along for a while, you ought to be able to feel this in yourself. I know at times it apparently gives you the blues and feels discouraging. That in ways I seem to have thought about so many new things. I've learned so much being here, but then another way I look around, I even hate to say it, but I'm almost the same bastard I was when I came here. No, that can't be. I must be overlooking something. The cosmic force is work in such a subtle way that I can't really completely grasp the changes that are taking place or about to take place. If you belong here, I'm telling you, 5,000 sit-ups a day, 2 hours a day, 6 days a week at Doc's gym, with no excuse. And you cannot, and no discussion. Of course, you can go ahead with the discussion. You can't stop it, but I'm just telling you one way to speed it up is to hell with the thinking about the action. Is do it because I am telling you if you belong in this, you eventually belong in a category of being able to hear something and do it without me staying on you. Is to go do that, and if you want to speed up the process, is just ignore any conversation. And I don't mean just trying to ignore or talk to your own partnership about, well, don't bug me, he said it was good for me and I think it is. Don't even discuss it. Just let the partnership just go on. That's thinking about action. You're acting. It's the only way you can look at it. I am going to act. I am going to Doc's gym from 8 until they close at 10. I'm going to get there every night. That is 6 days a week. I'm going to get there at 8 o'clock, and I'll be there at 10 when he flashes the lights, and I have to go hit the shower right quick. If I am alive enough to get out of bed, I'm going to be there 6 days a week by 8 o'clock, and I'm going to stay till closing. I don't care what my thinking of action talks about. I'm not going to answer. There's nothing to think about. I'm going to do it. I'm going to act. And those of you that can find the other way to do it, to work on a drastic alteration of thinking of action, same thing. But almost all of you could take the former approach. All of you could take it and benefit, but it becomes a matter of degree. PPP, that is post-pregnant pause. Still in the same neighborhood. Those of you can hear, I hadn't really moved much, but consider this. Consider the first part because I'm going to wrap it up as a fact. Does everyone remember in times past I have used a dichotomous description for specific purposes of man, of not just into three basic areas of circuitry, albeit interconnected, but at one time I used to refer to the figure of man, and I would draw the line of consciousness. Even further back than that, all of you who have not been here in person, I used to draw just a line. I'd normally draw it representing the cutoff between man's head and from there down. And it was like the more feral, uncivilized aspect of man, the lower stories of the factory, the oasis community in man, and then the part that was the city. The part that was the civilized part, the part that was the more sophisticated part. And at times, I have used this reference, or this frame of reference, is all over the world and throughout history. It's been noted politically, and then even socially, they've carried it further, but politically is the way it starts off. of liberals in the world and everybody else conservatives. Those that apparently are always in favor of change, and those that seem to always want to dig their heels in and say no change. And to the second group, the former group always seems to be, they're accused of, hey, they just want to change things for the sake of changing things. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Then the former group, the former group looks at the latter group as being in some way defenders of the status quo when it no longer is worthy of defense. They are defenders of outmoded ideas and etc. It is not simply a political observation or process, but I was just using that again as a kind of external example of something internally real. That is, that everybody has this line in them. And at times, if you recall, I used to refer to it, for those of you that didn't choke on it, I would refer to this down here as being Alabama. For a few people up north, is New Jersey. It had nothing to do with the state of the people there. It was the state or the condition of the man, of the community. That it is the conservative part, the Neanderthal thinking, yesterday's standards and morals, dreaming of yesterday. People in the South waving some kind of broken sword and hollering, hell no, we'll never forget the Civil War. And up here, the other part of what would be considered in the external world more liberal, saying you people living in the past, you're fools and you're idiots. All right. Reminding you of all that, and reminding you people from afar again, that I'm not talking about politics at all, I'm using terminology, I'm using examples apparently plucked from this great mundane exterior world into the more subtle, sophisticated, hopefully refined areas of your own internal community. Having said that, did you just say that? Having said that, let me point out that once any of your new liberal ideas become accepted, become acceptable to your lower conservative circuitry, the ideas are impuissant, they're empty, they're burnt out, they're impotent, no value, no nourishment. And yet, the transfer of energy, the flow of power in the world is predicated in part upon that being an absolutely unseen situation. But you've got to see that there is a continuing process. Now, I'm saying ideas now, but remember, it could also be actions. There'd be a point at which 2 hours a day, 6 days a week at Doc's gym would be, but I won't go any further, at least any of you think that you'll live so fucking long. But there is a continuing process. It goes on here Thursday nights. It goes on in things that you apparently begin to understand off on your own. That there is a continuing stream of apparently new. You know what apparently throw you? To you, they are new. And they are liberal in the sense of me trying to describe this, of that kind of cutoff inside of man's circuitry, inside of man's individual community, within this larger community of humanity. It is as though there is a line, and above the line you seem to be you seem to be liberal, open to new ideas, new thinking, new ways of doing. Below the line, you are an absolute stick in the mud, Tory, right-wing, conservative, throwback, dinosaur, and they are both valid. They are as valid as two of the three forces I refer to. Most people, within their own partnership, within their own community, they're aware of only one. They identify themselves. Remember what I was pointing out is just the ordinary definition of community to start with, is a group of people inside of you that identify themselves as having a common government. That is, that one side of the personality, the partnership, seems to be the governing, and another part of you seems to be that which is governed, whether you believe that you agree with it all the time or not. And that the community, that is you, that this group, has a common control That is, it's what's normally called one's individual personality. It has a common heritage. You are your genes. You can't fight that. You are your history. The history of your genes. Within this community seems to be, as in all communities, that there is a liberal wing and a conservative wing. If you're alive, it's there. But as everybody else identifies themselves as having a common definable government, that is a personality, then they seem to either be liberal or conservative. And remember, I am not talking simply about politics. I don't even talk about politics. But for those of you that need it, let me say I'm not just talking about politics, if you can't get any further than that tonight. So there is, from your view, a prevailing government in you, either liberal or conservative. It seems to be the dominant force, but there is a continuing sensation, once you see it, of new liberal ideas coming in. Right now, your only source, the source from it, is here. But then you begin, the more effort you make, the more it turns out that you are indeed one of God's little mutants, that you find that even without me force-feeding you, without me coming up with a new term or new description, you begin to have your own insights. You begin to understand what neuralizing is. That is, you begin to, off on your own, apparently develop. It just comes to you a new way of looking at something, a new way of thinking about something, a new way of pondering something, and that is a new, and that is a liberal idea. But unless it's going to die a short death, unless it's a seed that's not going to get fertilized, unless it becomes an event of a non-event, the day will come that that liberal, that new idea, is going to become acceptable to the lower circuitry, the conservative circuitry. And when that happens, impuissance, the idea is then worthless. It has been chewed up. This is not an absolute parallel, but if you've got to have it, if you think I'm getting too oblique, when you can do 5,000 steps a day, and it's so nothing that you're not even aware of it anymore. If somebody says, hey, do you still waste a lot of time doing steps during the day? And you go, oh, yeah, I forgot. That it's meaningless, the time it's taken is like it doesn't exist. When that's happened, like I said, I shouldn't really say this because some of you will go, aha, I knew it, therefore I don't have to do it. If it ever reached that point, it's become acceptable. The new has now become acceptable. The liberal has now become conservative, and it's useless. And you've got to press on. But the great killer is, one of the great tricks of life is that hardly anybody will ever get to that point. So there's no need to have someone wave a flag or to try to stick you in the rump with a sword and say, you got to move on. Nobody ever gets to the point that new liberal ideas become acceptable to the lower conservative circuitry within their own community. That new blasphemous activities now become part of the lower circuit's ritual. It is now an accepted part of your community. That which was unthinkable, that which was scandalous at some period in your life, in your community's life, is now accepted by the most conservative, by the most rednecks of the people in your community. Then whatever it was, it doesn't matter whether it was action or thinking of action, it's now impotent. But you don't have to worry about having to move on because hardly anybody, or to be more specific, hardly nobody will ever get to that point. People will think about it. There's, as many of you have done, which is even worse, if there was such a thing as worse, is you did it enough that your own partnership will say, you know what, that was a darn good idea. He was on to something. I really benefited if things hadn't happened in the way in which they did. And then you can do one of two great things, the way humans are wired up. is to believe, well, someday soon I'm going back to it. That's the most common. Well, you people, being a little more subtle, if not fuzzy and sly, can do this. I did it long enough to see where it was going, and therefore I don't really have to do it anymore. I can see the point of it. Point well taken. Got it. Next? What would I do next? Well, truthfully, what you should do next is get fucked. Because you didn't understand it. As long as you think, yeah, I got it. I don't have to do it anymore, I got it. Right. All you got to do is, if you think about it the right way, yeah, 5,000 steps a day. Let me think. Wait a minute. If I could figure, let me do a few and figure the time it would take, and I see how much earlier I have to get up, or wait, I could do 2,000 in the morning, and then I think about the time it would take. Yeah. I'll say I'll do a few. Yeah, I can feel. Yeah. Okay. Got it. In fact, I see it would interfere. I wouldn't drink as much. I wouldn't be running around at night out in the streets. I'd stay at home more. It'd probably focus my attention because since you mentioned it, one time I did get down and I did a couple of hundred there, and it seemed to cut down on some of the chatter. Yeah, I can feel. I really can. I can feel the kind of benefit. Got it. Got it. Therefore, I don't have to do it. Which, of course, is a fact. You don't have to do it. One more thing. To give the illusion of a specious, if not ephemerally spurious wrap-up. That's one of those kinds of sentences which can be not read, but can be heard both forwards and backwards with the same degree. With the same degree. There's another real neat deed and trick, it's a deed, that life does on man that's never been subjected to verbalization before. Of course, I'm just the dude to do it. And it is this. It's all, I guess we should put this in quotes till you see what I mean, all, quote, systematic approaches. This would include such things as religions, political ideologies, social and intellectual philosophies, and anything else that would fit a systematic approach. And I mean this in a very specific way, as you're going to see. All of these things, examples I mentioned, and many, 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 might I say, many more, have behind them an attempt and a purpose that humanity has never seen. And I'll begin by using a good axiom, one that's known to everyone: divide and conquer. Now, you would think, perhaps, being an ordinary person, that, for instance, religion is in some way to create a kind of cohesiveness in the community of all of mankind, and then in specific communities of the followers, the believers. And it would be political ideologies is to bring together groups of like-minded people once they hear about the teaching and the ideas and the theories, and etc. And it's not. It is based upon divide and conquer, and it works thusly. It is the apparent system, the religion, the ideology, is engaged in dividing everything into such small, apparently unconnected yellow circuit pieces as to render it all meaningless and impossible to comprehend. That is one of the more up-to-date and useful descriptions of religions. All philosophies, all theories, social, intellectual. It's true of science, but that really has no immediate bearing on what we're doing here. But any of you that begin to get any glimpse of this, as always, it can be seen, not that this is the only, or not that this is the finis of seeing this, but it can be seen from one very particular and not incorrect view that what is taking place is indeed the opposite from what everybody, including you, ordinarily takes as being the purpose. That all philosophies, all systems, spiritual, religious, economic, that's what I mean by systematic approaches, would seem on their face, once you mention it, to have as their intention, their purpose, their usefulness, is to bring together groups of people of like mind, of like spirit, of like feeling, or at least to give them an idea wherein people can apparently be attracted to it, gather around a common goal, common interest. It'll make them stronger politically, form into some pact group. Religiously, it may start off as an offshoot of some organized religion, and they seem to have new ideas, and they are like little spores, and they leap off of it, and they have a new systematic approach to religion. And it seems as though the systematic approach is to help bring them together, make them stronger, that they might grow, they might survive as a new religion, as a new group, as a new political group, a new economic group. And it's nothing of the kind. It is based upon, and its purpose is to divide and conquer. And it does it. Not some evil spirit. It's not some person somewhere behind this. It's not some group of people. It's life. And the way things are arranged. But the operation is thusly. That the divide and conquer is the division. And it starts off in our day and time apparently on a yellow circuit basis. That is, it's got to be described to you. The description may immediately attract you. It may be something that you feel like I've already agreed with. I'm glad I found you. Or it may apparently be new and liberal ideas that you apparently ingest and then digest and then agree with and then want to join up with. But what is taking place is a dividing up into ever increasing small and then smaller and then even smaller pieces that apparently become unrelated. Then they become meaningless. Then it is beyond ordinary comprehension. What could be more unrelated, to use religion's example, than the idea of a God and an anti-God? Never the twain shall meet. According to all religions, there's a right way of doing things, and then by God, there's the wrong way. Even by most philosophies. Most, I say, of course. That if a man was not religious, he would indeed develop or acquire some philosophical outlook on life and then try to let that influence his behavior to live an upright, profitable life. And then to do otherwise would be to, in some way, to deny the real spirit of being human. All philosophies, all religions, all systematic approaches are engaged in divide and conquer. And it ends up in human intelligence. It ends up in the yellow circuit. Was part of my original comment, if you recall, was the dividing up into such small and apparently unrelated yellow circuit pieces as to render it all eventually meaningless and beyond comprehension. And that is not the way the yellow circuit sees it. That is not the way the consciousness sees it. It still feels that if I could find some systematic approach, if I could find the right kind of mystical group, if I could find one that had a system to it, then I'd be getting somewhere. That it could tie up these loose ends. So people that show up to see tapes of me in these other cities once, sometimes 2 or 3 times, and they keep waiting, well, when's this all going to come together? Or they want to ask the people in other cities, well, do you have a little pamphlet or some kind of book that shows how all this is connected and, you know, the do's and the don'ts? And yet, it's not that they're wrong. I'm describing to you the way that life is arranged. That a systematic approach, people are wired up. Everyone accepts the fact. It's beyond any debate. Nobody ever thought about it this way. That the purpose of a system is to bring together some kind of common ideas, common approaches, common theories at least, around which I and other like-minded people, people who feel similar to me, around which we can all congregate, study, gain from, have some power. Perhaps we can attract some kind of assistance. And it is nothing of the kind. Religions do one thing. It's not an attack, remember, on religions. They're doing just what they should be. But it's not to produce some feeling of solidarity. It's to divide up everything. Life, man's thoughts, man's actions, man's feelings, the history of man, the possible future of man, speculation on the universe. Anything that religion is driven to feel like it's within its bailiwick is to continually divide it into smaller and smaller pieces. And one of the great examples back during, I guess it was the Middle Ages, when it got around to them having pontific fistfights over trying to estimate how many angels could tap dance on the head of a pin. You can say, well, that's ridiculous. No, that's not. That was just an extreme example. They went too far. Life had a little laugh at itself, I guess. As I point out, life will try anything that continually goes too far. Else, how do you explain you getting drunk? First couple of drinks tastes fine. It continually, in the case of religion, as I was using, it divides everything that seems to come within its purview. It'll divide everything into smaller and smaller pieces until they become so small, so apparently unrelated. But you've got to be able to see that, because they do still seem related. We're talking about good and evil. What could be more unrelated? We're talking about how to live now. We're talking about what may be your future in paradise and some other life. To them, it's some kind of continuum. That's because ordinary consciousness cannot see the obvious. That all systematic approaches are continually dividing that which they apparently are overseeing into such small pieces eventually that the pieces become yellow circuit unrelated, and the whole affair, whatever specifically might be under consideration, and then everything becomes meaningless. Now, consciousness may say otherwise. It may say, since I have become a good Catholic, since I've joined the church, since I went back to the temple, I feel like that my life now has a little more meaning. I feel as though I'm not so alone here. I feel as though there's a certain amount of security that I feel now. Right, that's true enough with ordinary people. But what has happened is the systematic approach has cut up everything into such small pieces eventually, so small that they have become yellow circuit unrelated, that anything that you mentioned specifically and everything in general has become meaningless. And therefore it is beyond comprehension, beyond mortal comprehension. It's out of my hands. I've done my best. Things are too complicated. It's not meant for man to understand all this crap. Who knows? No, that's true enough. But there are some people who do know. Anytime you're following any system, and that includes, of course, your own community, because it has a systematic approach. It has a sensation of a common governing body. It has a sense of a common history and culture, which it has. And as long as you live with that feeling of community, you are being beset by forces that are based upon divide and conquer. And you never can see the obvious. You'll never see what's going on. And yet it appears to be just the opposite. I want to do one more piece of a question that ties in with what I was talking about. Somebody has written, it's just some observations that they wrote me several weeks ago, and I'm going to read you part of it. Many moons ago, you spoke to us on the incomparable virtues of a deed well done as a kind of universal yardstick by which things should be rightfully judged. Although the idea struck me immediately as being responsive and profitable and correct, it's only recently that the reasons for such a standard has become partially clear to me. Part of my question seems to be that people in the group, and this came from somebody here in Atlanta, but it seems to this person, they say, that many people in the group seem to show, or they show no real conception or thought about this concept, which I'm not reading this, and I'm not supporting any feel that you have the person being critical, but they're making a note whether they understood it or not, which is a fair note, because I just made the same notation to you. They seem to have no real conception of the possible benefit and need to do a deed well done. Or to put it another way, people who might benefit considerably from such an idea being exposed to such motions in the way that only you, as me, can point out, yet it's been many, many moons since you mentioned this. And then they ask, somewhat rhetorically, I guess, but they say, is this a map that is about a deed well done that in some ways lost its flavor and power? Another part of their observation. The times you have presented opportunities and tasks, you seldom now make requirements, absolute requirements, or to follow up, openly at least, on whether things get done exactly or whether they got done on time, etc. Is this the only way that this kind of activity can be done? That is, giving out tasks. This checking up, unquote, in some way turn it into something ordinary. I was rewriting this as I read it, but I will trust that most of you got the gem, the kernel of what the person was asking. And I don't think I'm really going to answer it directly. But let me tell you, by me reading it, the way in which I did, there was a purpose. I didn't do it just to fill up some time on the tape. That they're asking me, for me to rephrase a little bit more, they're asking me, is there some reason that I come up with something that struck this person as being very basically important about a deed well done? And I don't guess all of you ever heard me talk about that. It has been a long time that I used that. I wrote a little bit about it, if the papers are still around. But that is a kind of absolute mutant yardstick. But then the person sort of asks, is there some reason that on some of these that seem to be so meaningful to them, that seems to be so potentially pregnant with value, that they're never mentioned again? Or it goes many moons, to quote them, and I haven't mentioned it. And then they ask, is this an example of a map that's lost its flavor? Of course, you can also throw into that, or not. Is there some other reason I haven't brought it back up? Not just this, but anything else that struck you. As I said, I'm not necessarily going to respond to this in a direct manner, but I am spending this time reading the question for a reason. And there are other part about me presenting unusual opportunities, giving out tasks that seem to present great possibilities. And then I seldom make requirements as to time, reporting, or I make less and less, it seems to them, or that I directly follow up, openly at least, they say. That does leave the possibility that some of you may not know that in some individual cases I might, but I'm not saying I do. But the observation is correct. That's no secret. That it seems as though I less and less follow up, that I make everybody report in some way all the time about, do this. Send me a note, tell me you did it. Show me the nail scars in your hand that you did it. Show me where they slapped you across the head when you ask about having keys made in a bridal shop. And then they ask, me not following up, me not giving absolute strict requirements that must be met in the time frame and how it was done, but me not following up openly. Is there some reason for this? Is it because that's the way it should be done? Or does a kind of strict checking up make the whole task turn to something else? I read you the questions. There were some good observations, good questions. I'm not going to respond. Of course, one reason is I already responded. Sayonara. I am going to give an update on the last major task I gave of 3 distinct, notable, rememberable times a day of not saying something that your own community wanted to say. Here is the update on that. I want everyone, from the time you get this tape, and starting tonight with you people hearing me in person, I want you to stop it. I want you to replace it with this. 4 times a day, I want you to refrain in the same manner that you've got to note it, number it to yourself, so at the end of the day that you can remember that, yes, 4 times, I remember the times when I did it. That same manner, 4 times a day, is not think something that the community as a whole was about to think. You're to do that for 10 days from today, from when you hear the tape, and then you're to go back to refraining from saying that which you wanted to say 3 times a day for another 10 days, and then stop it all. And during this time, don't piss in the sink.